SurePoint Advisors is registered as an investment advisor with the state of New Jersey. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply any specific level of skill or training and does not constitute an endorsement of the firm by Securities and Exchange Commission or any state securities authority.
Welcome to another episode of SurePoint Advisors Financial Roll Call with James Fay. We are 10 in service. This is a podcast for law enforcement, by law enforcement. I am James Fay. I'm a retired law enforcement officer and now financial advisor with SurePoint Advisors. I'm focused on helping law enforcement officers with making educated financial decisions that will directly affect their retirement. I truly believe that this podcast will help do that. Today's episode, I think, might be the most important to any financial plan. Today we're going to talk about estate planning. We like to see 3 pieces of paper in place for our law enforcement officers: your will, your power of attorney, and your living will. Extremely important. I can't tell you how many law enforcement officers I come across that either I sit down with to discuss financial planning or just in general conversation that do not have wills in place. I believe this episode will definitely create a call to action, and hopefully officers will start taking care of this. So throughout my career, I've attended numerous law enforcement funerals. And if you have attended one, that's one too many. I've also ridden in 16 police unity tours. So if you really want to have this hit home, if you ever been down to Washington, D.C. to the police memorial, which is sacred ground for any police officer. It has the names of every law enforcement officer that was killed throughout the country in the line of duty. So one thing I make a point to do when I'm down there after my ride is I just walk around that memorial and I see the pain and suffering that the families of the fallen law enforcement officers are feeling. And it really hits home. It really does. Every year I attend the annual New Jersey State Police Memorial in Ocean Grove. I can tell you the last 2 years that I've been there, part of the ceremony, they bring the families of the fallen officers up onto the stage to meet the numerous dignitaries that are up there, and they're recognized. And again, the last 2 times I was at the memorial, there was the spouse of an officer that was noticeably pregnant. And my thoughts immediately go to, God, I hope their estate planning was in place. I hope their financial planning was in place. That's the way I think. And I truly believe that is why, and this is why I do what I do. I believe that this allows me to give back to where I came from, to help educate law enforcement officers in and around finance. So when officers go to work, it's one less stress that they have to worry about. And when those officers finally make it to retirement, their plan is in place already, and it's one less stress that they have to worry about, and they can enjoy retirement. So I truly believe this is why I sit behind this mic and I speak this podcast, and I started it and I went into financial advising. It's to help those officers relieve that stress and to simplify financial questions that they might have. So today's guest, I think we got a great interview for you. I was able to speak with Michele Clark. Michele is an attorney that deals in estate planning. She deals with all of our law enforcement clients here at SurePoint Advisors. And she's very thorough. So I was able to speak with her late last week, and I want you to hear what Michele has to say, because we just actually scratched the surface on those 3 pieces of paper that that we like to see in place for law enforcement officers. So let's go to the interview. Welcome to another episode of Short Point Advisors Financial Roll Call with James Fay. We are 10-8 in service. This is a podcast for law enforcement by law enforcement. Today's guest, we have Michele Clark. Michele is an attorney with a local law firm here in New Jersey. Michele, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, James?
Good, thank you. Just to let our listeners know, Michele deals with the majority of estate planning for our law enforcement clients here at Short Point Advisors, and we get nothing but great feedback about Michele. So I'm happy that she is going to impart some knowledge on us here on this podcast. So let's get started.
Great.
So as you know, Michele, this podcast, I basically started this podcast to educate law enforcement officers in and around finance. This way they can make better decisions when it comes to finances. My goal is to have them take ownership that they are their number one asset and their ability to work, make money, and build wealth. So with that being said, there's certain ways they can lose that number one asset. And one of them is not having their estate planning in place. So what we like to see with our law enforcement officers is three pieces of paper: their will, their power of attorney, and their living will. So maybe we could start by just speaking about those estate planning forms in general.
Sure. So, James, you're correct. Whenever we talk about an estate plan, there are three basic documents that at a minimum somebody's going to have when they come to me. You're going to want to prepare a last will and testament, which basically disposes of your property in accordance with your wishes. You're going to have a power of attorney, which basically allows somebody else, an agent, to act on your behalf relative to all of your finances. They can do what you can do financially. And we have the living will, which is your medical preferences, and it allows you to appoint a medical agent that can then make medical decisions on your behalf. So important with the estate plan are those three things, because they cover a lot of different things. They cover you during your lifetime in the event you have mental incapacity, which could be anything. Could be complete incapacity, which is Alzheimer's, dementia, all those different illnesses that potentially would make you not lucid and not understand what you're supposed to be doing. Or it could be that you get into a car accident, you're in the hospital for 2 weeks, your loved ones need a way to have legal authority to do things on your behalf. So that's where the power of attorney and living will come in. The last will and testament actually comes into play after you're already deceased, and it disposes of your property the way you want it to do, and it appoints certain people in certain roles that allow your loved ones to sort of understand what it is that you want, basically.
Right, that's very informative. Let me ask you this. How important is it for law enforcement officers to have these pieces of paper in place?
Extremely important. It's important for everybody, but particularly with law enforcement, there are a lot of things that come into play. One, they're first responders. They're on the front line. Things change day to day, right? They have loved ones at home. They have family they want to protect. Sometimes they have firearms that they want to gift to a certain person upon their death. Without that last will and testament referencing those firearms, there's no way for your family to know your preferences for those things. A lot of times with law enforcement officers, their job comes with 401ks, pension plans, sometimes life insurance policies. All these things, when we discuss an estate plan, are going to come into play because we want to make sure we have certain beneficiary designations on each of these things that the department offers. Canine partners. Some police officers have canines. They want to, I know they belong to the department, but sometimes the department, upon the decease of the officer, will allow the canine to come home. Where would the canine go? Maybe you want to put something in your estate plan, in your last will and testament, that gives specific directions for the dog, because they're family members, and that's how officers treat them. So I think overall, there are a lot of specific things we can deal with when we're talking about an estate plan that are specific to police officers.
Very interesting. I mean, you touched on a few things there, obviously, that are well beyond my scope here as a financial advisor, but obviously that's why we send them to you to do all that work. And I can't begin to tell you how many, uh, how many law enforcement officer clients that we have that when we originally sat down, they didn't have wills in place. And I always thought that this is something that should have been done in the academy. And then possibly as their life changes, their wills change. I think it's that important. And that's why we really deal with it here at Short Point Advisors. And, we use a great estate planning attorney such as yourself. So, that information is priceless. And just real quick, tell our listeners what happens here in the state of New Jersey when you die without a will.
Sure. So basically, we call that dying intestate. It means you're dying without a last will and testament. So what that means is the state has certain statutes, and the intestacy statute basically says that if you die in New Jersey without a will, the state determines what happens to your property. So you no longer, as the deceased person, have any say as to where your property goes. So in a very simple family, husband, wife, two spouses and some children and some grandchildren, that may not be a problem, when the children actually belong to both spouses. But when we're talking about a blended family, we have stepchildren, we have adopted children, we have children from prior marriages that may or may not be involved in the estate plan if the deceased person has a choice. So basically under intestacy, it first starts with the spouse, and the spouse gets a certain amount. And if the spouse is also the mother of all the children or the father of the children, they then get most of the money goes to the spouse. If there are children outside of the spouse that are basically from the decedent's another spouse, like an ex of the decedent, let's just say, okay, then they'll get a portion of the property as well. So let's say somebody has children from a previous marriage, they're estranged, they don't talk to their children. That estranged child, regardless of the decedent's wishes, would then take under intestacy. They would take a portion. So it's basically spouse, then it goes to children, then it goes to grandchildren. If there are none, it goes up to the parents. If there are no living parents, then it goes to siblings. So that's usually where we take it. But most important in that is that if we have blended families, adopted children, stepchildren, children from prior marriages, all these people may or may not take. And it's very important that prior to your death, you actually make a determination as where you want the money to go so that you're not stuck within these parameters, because the state dictates it. And if you die without a will, there's no deviation from the statute. So right. It goes spouse, children, grandchildren, parents, siblings. And sometimes there may be a conflict with one of the siblings. I like sibling A, I don't like sibling B. Sure. Well, if you die without a will, you can't make that determination. The state's going to make it, and they're going to take equally under the statute. So sure. It's important to note.
A lot of moving parts there when it comes to estate planning. And again, that's why we do forward our clients, our law enforcement clients, over to you. It's funny you mentioned about some siblings that are in agreement and some that aren't. The last couple of years of my career I spent in the courthouse, and I can assure you we had more trouble in probate court than we did in criminal court.
Yes.
Anytime it comes to money, it seems to rip a family apart, and I'm sure you've seen it as well.
We have. We deal with estate administration, so we take the estate planning aspect prior to you die. And then we have clients who have deceased loved ones. They come to us to probate the will, to administer the estate. And more often than not, when the wishes are not properly documented in a last will and testament, there is conflict. And a lot of times it can end in estate litigation, whereas somebody's fighting the estate. Why did my dad not leave me what I think I deserve? Things of that nature. So to avoid all of that estate litigation and conflict, you can very simply create a last will and testament. It's not expensive. It does not take a lot of time. And it basically avoids all these issues,
Right.
that can occur if you die without it, basically.
Right. Right. It's extremely informative, and I know we just scratched the surface with this. And my plans are obviously to, with future episodes of this podcast, to actually delve into each one of those, the will, the power of attorney, and the living will, a little bit more. So I think that's great. I think we gave our listeners a lot of information today. Hopefully that will create a call to action, not only for my current law enforcement clients that are listening that have yet to follow through with their estate planning, but maybe some of these other officers that are listening, that it will create a call to action for them as well, and they'll get this paperwork taken care of. So with that, Michele, I really want to thank you for your time and all of your knowledge in and around this estate planning topic. I think it's very important in law enforcement, and I can't wait to have you back.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
All right, I want to thank Michele for her time. I know with any attorney, time is money, and she was able to really impart some great knowledge upon the estate planning process and what's important to have in place as law enforcement officers. So 10-11, prepared a copy. Let's review what we learned. We like to see 3 pieces of paper in place. That's the will, the living will, and the power of attorney. This podcast here today, this episode, should create a call to action. If you already have your wills in place, you should pull them out and look at them. Make sure they're up to date. Check them. Make sure all your wishes are in line. Okay? If you do not have wills in place, then you need to take the appropriate action to start this process. You need to get this going. This needs to create a call to action. For my current law enforcement clients that I already have, that I hope are listening to this podcast, if you haven't taken care of this yet, and I know who you are because I speak to Michele on a weekly basis and she gives me a list of all the clients that have not followed through yet, we need to take care of this. We need to get it done. It's important. So if you're not reaching back out to me, I will definitely reach back out to you. Again, I have that list. So for the law enforcement officers that are not clients of Short Point Advisors, and this is creating a call to action, and this is something that you want to start this process and you want to get this process moving and get some estate planning in place, by all means, you can call me in the office, 732-876-3777, or check the show notes for my email address. You can email me and I will be sure to get back to you. Please forward this info out to your law enforcement network. That is of the utmost importance. If you think this is important and other officers might enjoy listening to this podcast, by all means, please make sure it gets out to your law enforcement network so we can help educate the 40,000 plus law enforcement officers that we have here in the state of New Jersey. For the first time listeners that are listening today, and you feel that this is educational and it's something that you want to continue to listen to, please hit subscribe. With that, we'll make sure that we send you an email every time a new episode comes out, which should be weekly. So hit subscribe. With that, thank you for listening to another episode of Short Point Advisors Financial Roll Call with James Fay. We are 10-7 out of service.